I knew something was wrong the night my father forgot my birthday. Not in the casual way people forget dates. Not a rushed call the next day with an awkward laugh. He forgot in a way that felt deliberate, silent, clean, like erasing a line from a page. I turned 27 that day. I didn't hear from him, or my mother, or my younger brother. No message in the family group chat. No missed call. Nothing. At first, I told myself not to be dramatic. They were busy. My parents had been distant for months anyway. Short replies, vague answers, conversations that ended too quickly. Still, birthdays had always been sacred in our house. No matter how angry my father was, no matter how tight money got, no matter how ugly life became, birthdays were never ignored. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, eating takeout noodles straight from the container, watching the clock slide past midnight, waiting for a call that never came. That was the moment something inside me shifted. The next morning, my mother called like nothing had happened. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said slowly. "You?" She paused, just a fraction too long. I barely slept. So much on my mind. I waited. She didn't say it. "You forgot something," I said. Another pause. Longer this time. "Oh my God," she said finally, forcing a laugh. "Your birthday. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Things have just been chaotic. My father never called. That should have been my warning." 3 weeks later, I found the folder. I had gone to my parents' house to pick up old documents. I was applying for a mortgage, and my bank needed proof of address from years ago. My parents kept everything. Tax papers, utility bills, school records. My childhood house was a museum of paperwork. My mother was out shopping. My father was working upstairs. I let myself into the study, a room I hadn't touched in years. The same oak desk, the same filing cabinet, the same smell of dust and old ink. I started pulling drawers open, flipping through label files. Then I saw one that didn't fit. No label, just a thick brown envelope wedged behind older folders, pushed so far back it almost blended into the cabinet wall. Curiosity beat politeness. Inside were documents I had never seen before. Legal papers, medical forms, a hospital letterhead dated 28 years ago. My name typed across the top. I felt a strange pressure in my chest as I read. Birth records, adoption paperwork. I sat down hard in my father's chair, the leather cold against my palms. Adopted. The word didn't land at first. My brain skimmed it like a foreign language. I reread it. Then again. There was no mistaking it. I wasn't biologically theirs. My hands started shaking. My mouth went dry. The room felt too small, like the walls had leaned in closer while I wasn't looking. I flipped through the pages faster now, panic rising. A closed adoption. Confidential records. A clause about medical disclosure. Signatures at the bottom. My parents' signatures. I heard footsteps upstairs. I shoved the folder back into the envelope, heart hammering so loud I was sure he could hear it. I slid it into my bag, barely thinking, acting on instinct alone. When my father walked in, I was standing too straight, breathing too fast. "Find what you needed?" he asked. Yes, I lied. He looked at me for a second too long. His eyes flicked to my back, then back to my face. "Good," he said. "Your mother will be home soon." I left 10 minutes later, the envelope burning through my bag like a live wire. I didn't confront them right away. I don't know why. Fear, maybe, or denial, or the childish hope that there was some explanation that would make everything make sense again. Instead, I went home and read every page slowly. There was a name under birth mother. Why I didn't recognize. There was a date, a hospital, a city 3 hours away, and there was a handwritten note clipped to the back. She doesn't know. Never tell her. Promise. My mother's handwriting. That sentence changed everything. Not just that I was adopted, but that they had decided, together, to lie to me forever. I started noticing things I had ignored my entire life. Why my baby photos started late. Why there were no pictures of my mother pregnant. Why relatives used to say things like, "You came into their lives when they needed you most." Why my father always kept a slight distance, even when he was kind. Why arguments ended with, "After everything we've done for you." The pieces slid into place one by one, each one slicing deeper. I called my brother. "Did you know?" I asked without preamble. Silence. That was my answer. "How long?" I whispered. "Since I was 18, he said quietly. "They told me when I left for college. Said it was my responsibility to protect you. Protect me. By lying to my face for years. You let me believe I was broken," I said. "I spent my whole life wondering why I didn't fit. Why I felt off. I didn't know what to do," he said. "They said it would destroy you." I laughed then. A sharp, ugly sound. They were wrong. I hung up before he could say anything else. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every memory, every fight, every moment of affection, wondering which parts were real and which were built on obligation and guilt. The next morning, I drove back to my parents' house. They were both in the kitchen when I walked in. My mother was chopping vegetables. My father was reading the paper. I placed the envelope on the table. The sound it made when it hit the wood was soft, but it felt like a gunshot. My mother froze. My father lowered the paper slowly. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "You forgot to hide it better," I said. My mother's face crumpled instantly. "I can explain," she said, tears already spilling. I didn't look at her. I looked at him. "How long were you planning to lie to me?" I asked. "Forever," he said honestly. That answer hurt more than anything else he could have said. "You didn't think I deserved the truth?" I asked. My mother reached for my hand. I pulled away. "We wanted to protect you," she sobbed. "You were ours. Blood doesn't matter. It mattered enough for you to hide it," I said. My father stood up. "You're overreacting." That word snapped something inside me. Overreacting. I repeated. "You stole my history, my medical information, my identity. You had a good life," he said sharply. "That's what matters." "No," I said. "What matters is choice. And you took mine." The argument spiraled. Voices rose. Accusations flew. My mother cried. My father deflected. Justified. Minimized. And then he said something he didn't mean to say. "If you'd known, you might have gone looking for her." The room went silent. "Her?" I asked slowly. My mother's sobbing stopped. "You know who she is," I said. "Don't you?" My father clenched his jaw. "She didn't want you," he said. "She signed you away." "That's not what I asked." My mother collapsed into a chair. "We promised her we'd disappear," she whispered. She was young. Scared. Her family didn't know. "She asked us never to let you find her." "And you agreed," I said. "Yes." "For her sake," my father added. "For yours," my mother said at the same time. I picked up the envelope. "I'm finding her," I said. My father slammed his hand on the table. "You will not." I met his eyes. "Watch me." I walked out without looking back. That was the day my parents stopped being my parents. Over the next weeks, I became someone else. Someone quieter, sharper, more careful. I hired a private investigator. It cost more than I wanted to spend, but I needed answers more than I needed money. Her name was Maya. She lived 2 states away. She had 2 other children. She had never told them about me. When the investigator told me that, I felt the same hollow ache I'd felt on my birthday. A familiar emptiness. Rejection layered on rejection. I stared at her address on the page for a long time. Then I folded it and put it away. I wasn't ready yet, because before I could confront her, I needed to understand something first. Why my parents had really lied, and why, now that the truth was out, they suddenly seemed afraid of what I might do next. I didn't tell anyone I was going to see her. Not my parents. Not my brother. Not a friend. I took a week off work, told my boss I needed personal time, and drove 6 hours alone with nothing but the folded address on my passenger seat and a constant, sickening knot in my stomach. Every mile closer felt heavier. I kept rehearsing conversations in my head. Angry once. Calm once. Questions I deserved answers to. Accusations I've been holding for decades without knowing it. By the time I reached her town, all of it had dissolved into one terrifying thought. What if she didn't want to see me? Her house was small, blue siding, white porch railing. a swing hanging slightly crooked, toys scattered in the yard. That last part stopped me cold. Toys meant kids. Real kids. Kids she chose to keep. I sat in my car for nearly 20 minutes, watching the front door like it might open on its own and decide everything for me. Finally, I forced myself out. My hand shook when I knocked. Footsteps, lighter than I expected. The door opened halfway. She looked at me for a second with polite confusion. Then her face drained of color. "Oh," she whispered. She knew. "I'm not here to hurt you," I said quickly, the words tumbling out wrong and rushed. I needed to talk. She stared at me like she was looking at a ghost she'd convinced herself wasn't real. "I always wondered," she said softly, "what you'd look like." That sentence hit harder than any rejection could have. She stepped aside and let me in. Her house smelled like coffee and laundry detergent. Lived in. Warm. Everything my parents' house had started to feel like it wasn't. We sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around mugs neither of us drank from. "I didn't think you'd find me," she said. "I didn't know I existed," I replied. She nodded, eyes glossy. "That feels worse." I asked her why. She told me everything. She was 19. Her parents were strict, religious, and obsessed with appearances. When she got pregnant, they gave her a choice: adoption or exile. No contact, no support. She chose adoption because she was terrified. "I wanted you," she said, voice breaking. "I just didn't think I deserved you." That sentence lodged in my chest and refused to leave. I asked about the promise, the agreement to disappear. She winced. "They insisted. They said it was best for you. That knowing would confuse you, hurt you. So everyone decided for me," I said quietly. "Yes." I asked about the other kids. Her face tightened. "They don't know." "Why?" "Because I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid they'd see me differently. Afraid I'd lose them." That hurt more than I expected. Not because she didn't tell them. Because I understood why. We talked for hours. About genetics. About personalities. About weird little habits we shared. I laughed more that afternoon than I had in months, and that somehow made everything sadder. Before I left, she asked if I wanted to meet them. Her kids. My siblings. I said no. Not yet. Driving home, I realized something unsettling. I didn't feel angry at her. I felt angry at my parents. Because they hadn't just hidden the truth. They had controlled the narrative. Decided who got to love me. Who got access to me. Who got erased. And they were still trying to control it. When I got back, my father was waiting outside my apartment. "I know where you went," he said. "Of course you do," I replied. "She didn't deserve to see you," he snapped. "She gave you up. You don't get to decide that anymore," I said. "She'll hurt you," he insisted. "She already did once." "No," I said calmly. "You did." His face twisted. "After everything we sacrificed." "You didn't sacrifice," I interrupted. "You chose. And then you lied." He stepped closer. "You owe us loyalty." The word made something inside me go cold. "I don't owe you silence," I said. "And I don't owe you obedience." That was when he threatened me. He said if I kept digging, if I disrupted their peace, if I exposed what they'd done, they'd cut me off. Financially, emotionally, publicly. I looked at him and realized something terrifying. He was more afraid of being exposed than losing me. That night, I made a decision that would permanently fracture my family. And the next morning, I acted on it. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared, but because something inside me had finally gone quiet. The fear was gone. The confusion too. What replaced it was clarity. And clarity is dangerous when people have built their entire lives under silence. The next morning, I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, voice tight like she already knew. "You spoke to her," she said. "Yes." There was a pause, then a sharp inhale. "You had no right." That sentence snapped the last thread holding everything together. "No right," I said calmly. "To know where I came from? To know who lied to me for decades?" "We protected you," she insisted. "We gave you a life. You curated a lie," I said, "and you called it love." She started crying, real crying. The kind that used to make me cave instantly as a kid. This time, it didn't work. I need you to understand something, I said. I'm done pretending this didn't happen. Her voice hardened. What does that mean? It means the truth doesn't stay buried anymore. She begged me not to tell my brother. Too late. I had already sent him a message the night before. We met that afternoon at a cafe halfway between our places. He looked annoyed when he sat down, like this was an inconvenience. What's so urgent? He asked. I slid the folder across the table. The adoption papers, the amended birth certificate, the DNA results. He flipped through them casually at first, then slower. Then he stopped breathing. What is this? He whispered. The truth, I said. His hands started shaking. You're adopted? Yes. And they never told you? No. He leaned back, eyes unfocused. They told me you were just difficult, that you always question things. I let that sit. They told me you were ungrateful, he continued, that you made their lives harder. That was the moment I realized they hadn't just lied to me. They had divided us on purpose. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he said, they made me choose sides without telling me there were sides. Exactly. That night, he confronted them. I wasn't there, but I heard everything afterward. The shouting, the denial, the way my father tried to control the conversation, the way my mother collapsed into excuses, and then something unexpected happened. My brother walked out. He came to my place afterward, eyes red, voice hollow. They admitted it, he said. All of it. He stayed on my couch that night. The next week was chaos. Extended family found out. Old friends asked questions. Stories didn't line up anymore. My parents tried damage control, framing it as a misunderstanding, a painful but private matter. So I made it public. Not online, not dramatically. I told the truth where it mattered. To family members who deserved to know. To people whose trust had been manipulated. To myself. The final confrontation came a month later. They asked to meet. I agreed. We sat across from each other in the same living room where I'd grown up, where every photo on the wall now felt like evidence. You've destroyed this family, my father said quietly. No, it'll be, you built it on a lie. I just stopped holding it up. My mother asked if I would ever forgive them. I told her the truth. I might, I said, but forgiveness doesn't mean silence. And it doesn't mean pretending you didn't choose control over honesty. I stood up. For the first time in my life, I said, I'm choosing myself. I walked out without hugging them, and I didn't look back. Months later, I met my biological siblings. It was awkward, emotional, nothing like the movies, but it was real. And real, I learned, is better than perfect. I didn't lose a family. I escaped a lie. And for the first time, my life felt like it actually belonged to me. If you've ever been caught between loyalty and truth, or had to choose peace over pretending, I want to know what you would have done in my place. Tell me in the comments, and if stories like this hit close to home, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The night before my sister's wedding, my father called me into his room and locked the door behind me, like he was afraid someone might overhear what he was about to confess. His hands were shaking, not the kind of shaking that comes with age, but the kind that comes when a man has been carrying a lie for too long and it's finally crushing his chest. You can't let this wedding happen, he said. I laughed at first because it sounded insane. My younger sister, Anya, had been planning this wedding for almost a year. The house had been buzzing with relatives, decorators, caterers, non-stop phone calls. Everyone was exhausted but happy. Tomorrow was supposed to be perfect. What are you talking about? I asked. If Mom hears you saying things like this, she's the reason. He interrupted, his voice breaking. Your mother is the reason this wedding should never happen. That was the moment my stomach dropped. My mother was the backbone of our family. Strict, sharp-tongued, yes, but also respected. Feared, even. She handled finances, managed relatives, made decisions. Nothing happened in our house without her approval. The idea that she was hiding something big enough to cancel a wedding felt impossible. My father sat on the edge of the bed and rubbed his face slowly, like he was trying to wipe away the last 25 years of his life. Anya isn't marrying who you think she is, he said. And even worse, she's not who you think she is either. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I understood what he meant, he refused to explain further, but because something in his eyes told me this wasn't drama or paranoia. This was fear, the kind that comes when a man realizes he's about to lose everything. Growing up, our family looked perfect from the outside. Upper middle class, respected surname, big ancestral house, regular family functions, smiling photos. My parents had an arranged marriage, like most people in our circle. They weren't affectionate, but they worked together like business partners raising 2 children. Me, the responsible eldest son, and Anya, the pampered younger daughter. Anya was always special. Better clothes, more freedom, softer punishments. My mother never hid her favoritism. If I scored 90, it was why not 95? If Anya scored 75, it was she tried her best. I learned early not to complain. After college, I moved to another city for work. I visited during festivals, sent money home, stayed out of family politics. Anya stayed back, did her master's, and eventually started working at a design firm. That's where she met Raghav, her soon-to-be husband. Raghav was charming, too charming, polite to elders, generous with compliments, always knew what to say. My mother adored him instantly. My father was quiet around him, but I assumed that was just his usual reserved nature. When the engagement happened, my mother took full control. Lavish venue, big guest list, expensive gifts. She even dipped into our ancestral property savings without consulting my father. That should have been my first red flag, but I ignored it, because families like ours don't expect betrayal from inside their own walls. 2 weeks before the wedding, I noticed my father had lost weight. He stopped eating properly. He avoided conversations when my mother was around. Late at night, I'd hear him pacing in his room. When I asked him what was wrong, he brushed it off. Just tired, he said. But then came the night he locked the door. After that conversation, everything felt wrong. I started paying attention. I noticed how my mother controlled every wedding decision. Not just the budget, but the guest list. Certain relatives from my father's side were suddenly unnecessary. Old family friends were removed without explanation. When I asked her why, she snapped at me. You live outside. You don't understand how things work here. Raghav, on the other hand, seemed increasingly comfortable. Too comfortable. He spoke to my mother in low voices. They shared looks. Once I saw her hand rest on his arm for a second longer than normal. I told myself I was imagining things. Then I checked something I shouldn't have. My father had always handled property papers. One afternoon, while he was out, I went into his study and opened the old metal cupboard. Inside were files related to our ancestral land. Land my grandfather had passed down, land that was supposed to stay in the family. One file was missing. When I asked my father about it later, he froze. They're gone, he whispered. Your mother transferred them last month. Transferred to whom? He didn't answer. The truth came out in fragments. Not all at once. Like pieces of glass, cutting deeper the more you try to understand them. Raghav wasn't just marrying my sister. He was marrying into our property. My mother had secretly signed a power of attorney in his name. She justified it as future security for Anya. But the signatures were rushed. The witnesses were her relatives. My father's consent was forged. When my father confronted her weeks ago, she didn't deny it. She laughed. You were never capable of handling big decisions, she told him. At least now our daughter will have a strong man. Strong man. The more I dug, the uglier it got. Raghav's family was drowning in debt. Their business was collapsing. This wedding wasn't a union. It was a rescue mission funded by our inheritance. And Anya? She knew. That hurt the most. I confronted my sister late at night, 2 days before the wedding. She was sitting in her room, surrounded by clothes, jewelry, gifts. A life already packed and ready to leave. Did you know about the property papers? I asked her. She didn't look surprised. She looked annoyed. Why are you digging into things that don't concern you? She said. That land belongs to all of us. I replied. To Dad. To me. She rolled her eyes. You left, she said. You built your own life. This is my future. Raghav needs stability. So you're okay with Mom stealing from Dad? Her face hardened. She did what was necessary, she said. Dad would have ruined everything with his hesitation. That's when I realized something terrifying. This wasn't manipulation. This was alignment. My mother and sister were on one side. My father and I were on the other. And the wedding was the final nail. The night before the wedding, my father finally told me everything. Not just about the property, about Anya, about a secret he'd kept buried for over 2 decades. Anya wasn't his biological daughter. My mother had an affair early in their marriage. A powerful man from her side of the family. When she got pregnant, my father was pressured, emotionally blackmailed, into accepting the child as his own to save honor. He stayed. He raised her. He loved her. And now, she was taking everything from him. She was never supposed to know, he said, tears running down his face. But your mother, she's always protected herself first. I felt sick, not because Anya wasn't his biological child, but because of how easily she was ready to destroy the man who raised her. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't stop the wedding. I would let it happen, but I wouldn't let them win. By morning, the house was alive with music, laughter, rituals. My mother moved like a queen overseeing her empire. Anya glowed in her bridal outfit. Raghav smiled like a man who had already secured his prize. No one noticed my father sitting quietly in the corner, dressed but absent. No one noticed me watching everything, waiting, because part 1 of this story isn't about the explosion. It's about the calm before the destruction. And destruction was coming. The wedding hall smelled like jasmine, incense, and money. Too much money. Crystal chandeliers hung low over hundreds of guests, most of them smiling, laughing, unaware they were standing inside a lie that was already rotting from the inside. Raghav stood at the center of it all, dressed perfectly, posture confident, greeting guests like he already owned the place. Every time someone congratulated him, he smiled wider. I watched carefully how he shook hands with my uncles, how he addressed elders, how he avoided my father's eyes. Anya sat on the bridal stage, glowing under layers of makeup and jewelry. She looked happy, not nervous, not conflicted, happy in a way that made my stomach twist. My mother moved between guests like a general inspecting troops. She checked arrangements, whispered instructions, corrected mistakes. When she passed me, she leaned in and said quietly, "Don't ruin today with your attitude." I looked at her and realized something chilling. She wasn't afraid. She truly believed she had already won. The rituals began slowly. Music, blessings, laughter, cameras flashing. Every few minutes, my phone buzzed with messages from relatives asking why my father looked so quiet. "He's tired," I replied to each one. But the truth was worse. He was waiting. An hour before the main ceremony, my father pulled me aside again. His voice was calm now. Too calm. "Are you sure?" he asked. I nodded. "I've already done what I needed to," I said. He didn't ask how. He didn't need to. Here's what my mother didn't know. 3 days earlier, after learning about the forged signatures, I had met a lawyer friend quietly. I brought copies of the property papers my father still had, along with bank statements that showed sudden transfers my mother couldn't explain. The power of attorney? It existed, but it was incomplete, rushed, legally vulnerable. More importantly, Raghav's family debts were public record. Loans taken under false collateral, pending notices, threats from lenders. If exposed at the right moment, everything would collapse. But legal documents alone wouldn't hurt enough. Not emotionally, not publicly. So I prepared something else. As the priest began chanting, guests leaned forward, phones ready. This was the moment everyone waited for. The tying of the knot, the photos, the applause. Before it could begin, my father stood up. The microphone was still in his hand from the previous ritual. The priest paused. My mother froze. Raghav looked confused. "A moment," my father said, his voice carrying across the hall. I need to say something. A murmur spread through the crowd. My mother rushed toward him. What are you doing? She hissed. He didn't look at her. For 25 years, he continued, I have stayed silent. I have kept peace. I have sacrificed dignity for the sake of family. The hall went quiet. This wedding, he said, is built on lies. Gasps rippled through the guests. My mother reached for the microphone. Stop this nonsense right now. He stepped back. I won't, he said calmly. That's when I stood up too. People turned as I walked toward the stage. My heart was pounding, but my face was steady. I took the second microphone. If you're wondering why this is happening, I said, it's because the truth was buried for too long. Raghav's smile disappeared. Anya looked at me like I had slapped her. What truth? She snapped. I looked directly at Raghav. Your debts, I said. Your collapsing business. The reason you needed this marriage so badly. His face drained of color. That's private, he said quickly. So is our inheritance, I replied. My mother screamed my name. Enough, she shouted. You're embarrassing us. I turned to the guests. Did you know, I said, that weeks before this wedding, property worth crores was transferred without consent? That signatures were forged? That this wedding was used as leverage to secure financial rescue? Whispers exploded around the hall. Relatives stood up. Phones came out. Not for photos, but recordings. Raghav stepped toward me. You're lying. I smiled. No, I said. I came prepared. A screen behind the stage flickered on. Documents appeared. Bank transfers. Property files. Loan notices. My mother screamed. She lunged for the technician, trying to pull cables out. Security stopped her. Anya stood up, shaking. What are you doing? She cried. This is my wedding. You knew, I said softly. You knew and you chose this anyway. She looked at me, then at my father. For a second, something like guilt flickered across her face. Then it vanished. So what? She snapped. He agreed to raise me. He owes me. That sentence killed whatever was left. Guests gasped audibly. My father closed his eyes. Raghav grabbed Anya's hand. Let's go, he whispered. We don't need these people. That's when the lawyer arrived. He walked down the aisle calmly, carrying a file. Mr. Raghav, he said loudly, on behalf of multiple creditors, I'm serving you notice of fraud, misrepresentation, and pending seizure of assets. The hall erupted. Raghav's parents stood up in panic. My mother collapsed into a chair, screaming that this was all a setup. Anya started crying, not tears of regret, but rage. You ruined my life, she screamed at me. No, I said quietly. You chose this. Security asked guests to remain seated. The priest backed away slowly. The music stopped. The decorations suddenly looked ridiculous. Raghav tried to talk his way out. This is a misunderstanding, he said loudly. Family matters shouldn't be discussed publicly. But the damage was done. People had seen the documents. They had heard the words. They had watched the bride accuse the man who raised her of owing her his life. There was no recovery from that. My mother finally stood up again, her voice shaking with fury. You think you're smart? She spat at me. You think this ends here? I looked at her. No, I said. This is where it begins. She laughed bitterly. You have no idea what you've done. Oh, you don't, you replied. And so will everyone else. The wedding was officially canceled within the hour. Guests left in stunned silence, whispering stories that would spread faster than fire. Raghav's family disappeared quietly. Anya locked herself in her room. My mother didn't speak to anyone. My father sat beside me, exhausted but lighter, like a man who had finally set down a weight he never should have carried. But this wasn't over, because humiliation is only the first step. The silence after the wedding disaster was louder than the screaming had been. For 2 days, no one in the house spoke. The servants moved carefully, like they were afraid even footsteps might set something off. My mother stayed in her room with the curtains drawn. Anya didn't come out at all. My father barely ate. And me? I waited, because when lies collapse publicly, the real damage doesn't happen on stage. It happens afterward, quietly, systematically. The first consequence arrived on the third morning. Raghav was arrested, not dragged away in handcuffs dramatically like in movies, no. It was worse. 2 officers showed up at his parents' house, while relatives were still there trying to do damage control. White-collar charges. Fraud. Forgery. Misrepresentation. The same documents I had displayed at the wedding had already been submitted officially. Turns out humiliation spreads faster when paperwork follows it. By afternoon, local business circles knew. By evening, everyone knew. The family that once boasted about overseas properties suddenly stopped answering calls. My mother finally came out of her room that night. She looked smaller, older, not angry anymore, just hollow. She sat across from me at the dining table, hands shaking slightly. "You planned this," she said. "Yes," I replied. "You destroyed your sister's future." I met her eyes. "No, I exposed it." She laughed bitterly. "You always wanted revenge." "No," I said calmly. "I wanted honesty. You made me choose revenge." Her lips trembled. "She's my daughter, and he's my father," I replied. That ended the conversation. Anya didn't speak to me for a week. When she finally did, it wasn't an apology. It was a demand. She stormed into the living room one evening, eyes red, face tight with anger. "You think you won?" she snapped. "I think the truth won," I said. "You humiliated me in front of everyone." "You humiliated yourself," I replied. She laughed sharply. "You were always jealous." That stunned me. "Jealous?" I repeated. "Yes," she said. "Of me. Of how much they cared. You were just the son. I was the investment." That sentence explained everything. Years of favoritism, excuses, silence. It wasn't accidental. It was intentional. "You know what the worst part is?" she continued. "Even now, you think you're the hero." I stood up slowly. "No," I said. "I think I survived." She stared at me, then turned and left. That was the last real conversation we ever had. The legal fallout dragged on for months. My mother was questioned, not arrested, but warned. The forged power of attorney nearly cost her everything. If my father hadn't intervened, it might have. My father reclaimed control of his assets. Quietly, legally, completely. The house, the accounts, the decisions. For the first time in decades, he made choices without asking permission. He moved into a smaller apartment nearby, by choice. Peace over pride. Relatives changed overnight. The same people who once avoided me now called to check in. I didn't answer. You learn something important during betrayal. Silence shows you who deserves noise. One evening, my father and I sat on his balcony, watching the city lights. "I should have protected you," he said softly. "You did," I replied. "Eventually." He nodded. "I stayed too long." "Yes," I agreed. "But you left." That mattered. Anya moved away within 6 months. No budbie, no closure. Just gone. I heard later she tried to rebuild her image elsewhere. New city, new story, same denial. Some people don't learn from consequences. They just relocate. As for my mother, something inside her broke permanently. Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet, irreversible one. She lost the illusion of control, and that hurt her more than losing money ever could. A year later, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Raghav. Short, bitter, desperate. "You didn't have to ruin everything." I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed back, "I didn't ruin you. I stopped protecting you." I blocked the number. Closure doesn't always come from forgiveness. Sometimes it comes from finality. Today, my life is quieter. Smaller circle. Fewer celebrations. More truth. I trust slower. Speak less. Watch more. But I sleep better. Because once you survive betrayal from the people who were supposed to love you most, nothing else scares you the same way again. And if you stayed with me through this entire story, you already understand something important about loyalty, family, and consequences. So if you want more real stories like this, where truth doesn't get sugar-coated and actions actually have weight, make sure you subscribe, because the next one hits even harder.